Hello everyone, time for another Wargaming update, and what I'm going to do today is tack on to the end of this update a sort of brief as possible channel update as well. It seems to make sense because I wanted to make a very kind of insignificant, unimportant channel update as well, and wasn't worth making a separate video, and as the majority of my subscribers I would imagine are wargaming, view for my wargaming related content, I'll reach the sort of greatest proportion of my audience by tacking on the end of this wargaming update. So here we go. So I'm going to start off with these three figures here, which were very kindly sent to me by Karen at the YouTube channel Kits with Karen. I'll put a link to her channel down the bottom, so if you're not familiar with her channel you can go and subscribe and watch it. Yeah, these are 3D printed 15mm figures that she purchased inadvertently, thinking they were 28mm, and you can see why it's an easy mistake to make, because the detail on them is just incredible. But they are 15mm, believe me. Not much to say about them in terms of the figures, other than to stress their quality. But I did want to make a few remarks on the difference in painting 3D figures to my more traditional, my more habitual metal figures, or indeed even plastic figures. The big difference is that 3D figures aren't sculpted using tools and crafting blades and all that kind of thing. They're actually designed digitally, so it means that it's possible to create a figure in a pose where there are recesses and parts of the figure that you may not be able to easily reach with the point of a paintbrush, and that's because that area has never been necessary for that area to be reached with the point of a sculpting tool or something like that. So you do find, I don't know if others have found this, but you can come across occasions where you have to just sort of soak paint into a particular area rather than actually successfully reach it with a paintbrush. That wasn't the case necessarily with these figures so much. There were a few little spots where you just had to sort of dab it with the paintbrush rather than carefully apply the paint. But in general, I have found that, especially with buildings, interiors of a building can be obvious to the eye, but they would say they're inside a building, and the only way you can see them is through a window. But to actually get a paintbrush right the way through that window and onto the surface is very difficult. And the other thing that I found, which is something that I'm not accustomed to as well, as I usually paint metal figures, is that there's no kind of pudding base or anything, beneath the figure. It's just the feet, which you then have to glue to a base, and a lot of people prefer that anyway. It means that they can, they will deliberately cut metal figures from the pudding bases in order to be able to base them onto a particular style of base, like wooden planking or paving stone or something like that. But my tendency is to actually stick the pudding base down to the base that I'm going to have the figures on, and then use something like polyfill or something like that to raise the level of the base up to the level of the pudding base. And so I found with these that you can't actually do that, because then it would conceal the feet or something like that, make it look as though the feet are sunk deep into the ground. So I had to sort of change my basing technique slightly to do it as well. Those are just observations. They're not criticisms of 3D printing or anything like that. I've got a 3D printer myself, and I print figures on it, and enjoy the ability to do so, and think the quality of them is probably a lot better than metal figures. But just an observation of the changes to your painting and basing and so on that you have to allow for. So once again, thanks very much to Karen, and on to the next group of figures that I've painted up in recent times. Okay, next up then, it's been years, literally years, since I've touched my Crimean War project, and I just had a hankering to get back to it, so got these out of the lead mountain. These are the same range as all my other figures for the Crimean War, 18mm Eureka figures. I sort of finished the British Army, and have got a few other little bits and pieces, like a unit of French chasseurs d'Afrique, and quite a lot of Russian artillery, but I never sort of ventured onto the Russian army proper, as it were, in terms of infantry and cavalry. So hopefully, this is the beginning of the last stage of the project, which is to get a Russian army together. Painted it as sort of fairly generic unit. The webbing and so on does vary from one unit to another, depending on its position in the, I think it's in the brigade. I think different divisions have different either white or black webbing and so on, but this is a very kind of common appearance, so it's just a generic unit of Russian infantry in the caps rather than in the pickelhaube helmet that a lot wore. And the flag is from Maverick Models, which I can highly recommend that company, because without their service of kind of resizing their flags to fit your figure, it would be virtually impossible to find flags for 18mm scale. But for an additional charge, they will up the size of a 15mm flag. In fact, I think if it's within certain parameters, there's no charge at all. Can't remember if I actually paid for the increase in size or not, or whether it's just a service they provided. But either way, definitely a valuable service, so I can highly recommend Maverick Models. Okay, on to the next thing. Okay, next up, 8 figures from Ironclad Miniatures, 28mm. These are from their Boxer Rebellion range, and they are Kansu Braves. They're sculpted wearing traditional dress, so the sort of apron-like bit of clothing that they're wearing underneath the tunic over their trouser legs. So I've painted them up as best I can in the same way as the illustration in the Osprey book on the Boxer Rebellion. The only thing I didn't have the courage to do, and A, because it was difficult to do, and B, because the area of the body is kind of obscured by weapons and arms and so on, so it would have been virtually impossible to do anyway, is to paint the Chinese characters on the chest, which denoted the particular position in. Let me see if I can read it from the Osprey book rather than try and explain it myself. So it says, the black Chinese characters appearing on the man's chest identify him as being from the centre section of the bodyguard of the officer commanding the army. So in other words, that's going to differ depending on where the person is positioned in the particular unit. So you're going to have to sort of invent the Chinese characters yourself, and it just wasn't worth the effort of making a bodged attempt to put something on that wouldn't look right anyway. So yeah, so these are the first opposition I've got to my Japanese figures that I painted so far, and the Italians that I've got. So should be able to slowly progress with that project as well. Next up, another 3 mounted Berbers for my Beaujesse project. These are again from 1898 miniatures. The 1898 miniatures is actually a Spanish company, I believe, but they're available through Empress Miniatures in the UK, and that's where I got these. So slowly chipping away at that project. There's another 3 figures done, and I think I've got about not sure, about 16 figures done now. I've got another either 6 or 9 to do, and then I'll move on to some dismounted figures that I got from Castaway Arts in Australia. So gradually kind of adding to my collection of Berbers. Anything I'm not too keen on, or not too happy about, I should say, really, rather, because I do like the horses, is just the fact that the whole range is composed of just 3 different horse poses, so it does get a little bit repetitive after a while. But other than that, really happy with the range. And finally, in the way of painting, these are a few more bits and pieces that I put together for the 2mm Strength and Honour game. Not much in the way of figures, just 2 more war bands for the ancient Britons, but quite a lot of bits of wood or forest made from the bobbly bath mat material. And in the past I've shown you close-ups of these figures, but I don't think it's worth doing that again, because you can always go back and look at the detail that you get from 3D printing 2mm figures rather than purchasing metal. But I'll just zoom in a little bit on them. There's only so far I can go before it goes out of focus, but it will give you a slightly better idea. Try and get it focus, there we go. So 2 more war bands will constitute 1 more tribe for the Watling Street scenario at the back of the rule book. So now I've got to move on to some cavalry and some skirmishers, and then I'll be able to play the Watling Street scenario. Hopefully be able to do a back rep of that on my channel at some stage. So that is all the painting. So now on to the purchases I've made. Okay, haven't purchased any figures recently for a variety of reasons. I mean, I don't really need any more figures, but had I attended any of the recent shows, I would inevitably have come back with some figures, but decided not to go to Salute in the end, because it was the same weekend as the London Marathon, it often is, and that just bumped the price of a hotel room for the Saturday night up even more than its usual exorbitant price. So it just wasn't worth the train fare and the hotel cost of a hotel to do it. And then I consoled myself with the thought that I could go to the local show in Exeter, reasonably local show in Exeter, Legionary, which was mid-May, and about the day before, 2 days before I was going to go to that, I realised that there was a train strike on that Saturday, which made it difficult for me to get to it. I could always have got in touch with a friend to see if they were going and hitched a lift, but decided not to in the end, so didn't go to that either. And I definitely missed out by not going to the Legionary show, because I bumped into a friend of mine who did go to it later, and he told me he'd picked up on the bring and buy a massive bag of 18mm Crimean War Eureka figures for £12, and scandalously he's going to use them, convert them for use in Napoleonic games. But yeah, I would have snatched at those if I'd seen them. But anyway, there we go, missed opportunity. But as you can see, I have acquired a few wargaming related items. Again, Karen at Kits with Karen very kindly sent me a fridge magnet and a key holder, key ring, with artwork from the old Airfix HO00 scale plastic figures. This one in particular, the Union infantry, I remember fondly from my childhood. In fact, this was a later box. The box I had was the original one that came out in the 1960s. But nevertheless, I mean, I'm a big collector of fridge magnets anyway, so that's going to look really good on my fridge. And the key ring is always going to be useful as well, but it's more for the kind of nostalgic feel of these two bits of artwork that I appreciate this gift. So once again, thank you to Karen for another kind gift. Book-wise, I've got hold of a few books, archaeology related rather than history related, but this is a kind of history channel. Not although a lot of my content is wargaming related, it isn't meant to be specifically a wargaming channel. More on that in a minute. But I picked this up in a used bookshop. The Indus Civilization by Sir Mortimer Wheeler. If you're, a keen and follower of archaeological subjects, you wouldn't instantly recognise the name of Mortimer Wheeler. He was a very prominent archaeologist back in the 40s, 50s and 60s, and was still going in the 1970s. This edition, I think, was the third edition of this book. Third edition, and it was reprinted in 1972. So this particular book dates from 1972. But he was a pioneer of archaeological techniques and so on, grid patterns and that kind of thing. There's some brilliant pullouts in this book of various sites, Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. There's an example of the grid-like fashion in which he excavated the sites. And yeah, really happy to get hold of this. Very famous archaeologist and famous dig and a famous book. Purchased via Amazon, I think it was. This book here, Devon and Exeter in the Civil War. Again, this dates to the 1970s. 1971. And got this mainly for the chapter on the Siege of Plymouth, which at some point I will do a video for my YouTube channel on the Siege of Plymouth, and it's going to come in quite handy for that. It's quite a dry book, not much in the way of detail on military matters. It certainly doesn't deal with, you have to know what's going on in the rest of the country, because he doesn't deal at all with the history of the Civil War. Its main focus of this book is on not even the fighting in Devon and Exeter, but the the way the county was, how can I say, kind of how it swayed, how the originally the parliamentarians were far better organised and motivated and so on, and were able to get hold of the kind of grassroots level militias and so on in each town. But the royalist army, especially Cornwall, was particularly strong royalist sympathies in Cornwall, and how just by sheer brute force they managed to kind of gain control of all of Devon and Exeter. Exeter at the time was a separate county, sort of weird idea, but Exeter was the county town of Devon, but it was also a county in its own right, so it had different governmental structures and so on. And it's all about the politics of the local politics as much as the local fighting. But the one city that held out for the parliamentarians throughout the war was, of course, Plymouth. And that was crucial probably to the parliamentarian success in the war, because all the time that Plymouth was a parliamentarian stronghold, it meant that the Cornish in particular were very reluctant to move far from their own county. They would certainly venture into Devon, and often did, but they weren't prepared to go much further than that. And likewise, all the militias all had this sort of their primary regard was to protecting their own properties and their own local area. So again, with the threat of forays from Plymouth, they were very reluctant to move to join in the fighting in the rest of the country. So it held, Plymouth holding out held down a vast amount of the royalist forces, and also kind of prevented reinforcements arriving from places like France and Ireland and so on, which was a big fear of the parliamentarian side, that the royalists would get Catholic forces to come in support them from Ireland, by coming in from the north of Devon and so on. So yeah, quite a dry read, but very interesting, very, very good book, can recommend it. And then finally, in the way of books, whenever I go to a particular charity shop in Plympton, which is close by Plymouth, I always seem to come across Osprey books going for £2.50. They seem to have a bottomless supply of them, don't have them all on the shelves. So I just, as long as I haven't got the particular book, I will buy it regardless of whether I'm into the period or not, just because I think £2.50 is a good price to pay for Osprey books. So this one, yeah, I've got medieval figures covering this period, so the Scottish and Welsh Wars, an old Osprey book now, so they're plates, they're older plates, are quite dated now, but they're still very good. Prussian line infantry, so I think I can't remember the last time I was in there, I got a Prussian command or something like that, or specialist troops, I can't remember, but this is a more mainstream type of infantry, even though I'm not into I'm into the Napoleonic Wars, but I haven't got any Prussian figures. But as I say, buy it because it's good value at £2.50. Mexican-American War, always had an interest in it, never wargamed it or anything. I have played games. Set in the Mexican-American War, but I've never actually collected any figures myself, painted any. And this one, you will know, I'm heavily into the Anglo-Zulu Wars, and I didn't actually have this particular Osprey. It's a very old book, probably out of print, which is why I've never got hold of it. But worth adding to the collection. So that is the end of my wargaming and history related purchases. So now let's, as I say, I wanted to do a kind of very brief as possible. Knowing me, it will probably extend into quite a long waffle, just to give you a bit of an update on my channel and my relationship with YouTube. Okay, now recently I had to replace this old mobile phone that I've relied on for a long time with a newer smartphone. And when I say I had to, it turned out I didn't have to at all. I purchased a drone, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment, and a lot of drones require you to plug your smartphone into the control device, the flight controls, and use the screen of the mobile phone. But I purposefully purchased a drone that came with a remote controller with a screen and so on, and then I panicked reading through the not particularly well written instructions and manual and so on, and thought that I needed to download to this remote controller an app that it was only possible to do through an Apple device. So I had to get an Apple device in order to do that, and then connect it to the remote controller briefly to transfer the app. But it turned out that the app was already on the remote controller, so in a way I'd wasted my money on a new phone, but it was only going to be a matter of time before this either packed in or became obsolete in terms of technology, and I wouldn't be able to use it. So I was going to be compelled to get a smartphone anyway. So it's done now, but it's quite a bitter pill to swallow, because you may know from my rants on my channel and so on that I really think smartphone technology is more of a curse than a blessing, and it sort of alters the way people interact with the world. And I value the fact that I don't need a phone. Everyone tells you that they need their phones, but when you analyse it, the need is more of an addictive need rather than a practical need. As you can see, it's turned off. The first thing I did was to learn how to switch it off completely, and I will have it for the same reasons that I have this. I had this, which is really to receive SMS text messages as sort of security for online banking and so on, an added piece of security for that, and for making calls when I'm away from my landline and my home, so be able to ring for taxis or get in touch with people when I'm staying away from home and so on. And that's about it. And I will certainly, when I'm more familiar with this phone, I will use it as a camera, because the photographic elements of these cameras is now so good that it's kind of more or less replaced more traditional cameras. So I'll certainly make use of the camera on this. But other than that, it's no more use to me than this was. And but the reason I'm showing you this is that I wanted to talk a little bit about my relationship with YouTube, which has definitely changed and is still changing, and it's made me think about some changes that I want to do to my channel. As you know, about over a year ago now, I disabled comments on my channel. I won't go into the reasons for that again, but that has been a kind of mixed blessing in a way. I kind of miss the interactions I have with a great many of you, but at the same time, I'm very glad, not to have to answer really kind of inane and sort of fairly ignorant statements. Often they're comments that are just designed to draw attention to the commenter's own channel in a way, I'm pretty sure. And on top of that, you've got the trolling and so on, which I'm obviously, glad to have got rid of. But at the same time, I do miss my interactions with several of you out there who you will know who you are. And the other thing that happened at the end of last year, which has dramatically changed my view of YouTube, is that earlier on than that, some time ago now, YouTube announced that they were going to monetize. They were going to take it upon themselves to have the option of monetizing content, even if the channel owner had decided not to monetize it. So, in other words, if you had below 1,000 subscribers, you weren't eligible to monetize your channel anyway. But even if you had over 1,000, as I did at the time, and still do, it's slowly going up. If you chose not to monetize your channel, then they would, take the liberty of monetizing it and keeping the advertising revenue for themselves. So I certainly wasn't prepared to allow someone else to profit from my own material, even though I wasn't interested in gaining any revenue from YouTube. I didn't see why someone else should gain revenue from my material. So I monetized my channel, and then I could control the type of adverts that would appear and where they would appear. So I only allow adverts at the beginning and end of my content, and not in the middle of the content. And I wasn't really aware of the effect of advertising, because at the time I used AdBlock, and I thought AdBlock was a wonderful service. It was completely free, and I didn't see advertising of any sort when I went to not only YouTube but to any other website. Unfortunately, I made the error of I used to, every now and again, you will get a sort of request from AdBlock to donate a certain amount of money, a bit like you do with Wikipedia. Wikipedia do the same thing. And I was so grateful for the service that I made an over generous kind of payment on one particular occasion at the end of last year to AdBlock. And they came back with a responding email saying, well, for that price, for that donation, you're entitled to upgrade your subscription to AdBlock. So, we're offering you that. So I immediately thought, well, yeah, that's worth having. I'll do that then. And unfortunately, by upgrading it to this sort of premium service, I haven't got a clue what the term means, but I had to make use of what's known as a VPN, a virtual private network, and didn't think much of that. Didn't think any more of doing that until one day I went to log into the National Lottery to add some more money to my payments and buy a lottery ticket. And I wasn't allowed to log in, and couldn't understand why. And after a lot of investigation, it turned out that in order to do online, I suppose it's online gambling of a sort, you can't make use of a virtual private network. So in order to carry on playing the National Lottery online, rather than doing it by going into buying a ticket over a counter in a shop somewhere, I had to unsubscribe from AdBlock, thinking that I could go back to the old free service. And now it turns out that the free service is no longer available. So I had deleted a perfectly usable service, and can now no longer use it. So ever since then, I've had to put up with advertising, seeing adverts on websites and seeing it on YouTube, and it has really drastically changed what channels I watch. I have indeed seen adverts in content that belonged to channels. I think it was, he either had 7 subscribers and 15 videos, or 15 subscribers and 7 videos, but it was a tiny channel, and yet there was an advert in one of his videos because it was on the subject of a black powder war game, and the algorithms and so on YouTube had immediately spotted the term black powder and recognised that it was a popular tag for videos, so that YouTube had plonked a video at the beginning of his an advert at the beginning of his video. And so it can happen that smaller channels do get adverts in their content, but there are other much bigger channels, one in particular that I won't name. It's kind of vaguely wargaming related, so a lot of wargamers won't be familiar with it, but he absolutely milks the advertising revenue on his channel. And in a 50-minute video, some of his videos range from 10 minutes up to about an hour, but in a 50-minute video that I watched of his, there were 7 commercials. I think there were 2 at the beginning. Yeah, so there were more than 7. There were 7 commercial breaks, as it were. There were 2 at the beginning, 1 at the end, and 5 at sort of 7 to 8 minute intervals in the middle of his content, which wasn't particularly arresting content anyway. So I have just stopped watching that channel, and that's perfectly fine. I've always said in the past, I never really understood the dislike button, because if you're going to dislike a video, why not just not watch it in the first place? I think that's perfectly valid. So I am choosing not to watch content channels that have adverts in the middle of their material, because they can choose, if they wish, not to place adverts there, and I find the adverts very distracting. It's kind of made me up the bar of the type of video of channels that I will watch, simply because some of them I watched just to pass the time, really, rather than because they had anything that I particularly wanted to watch. And it's really changed my experience of YouTube as a viewer. But as a content provider, again, I am increasingly kind of concerned by the amount of advertising on YouTube, because it definitely alters the way that channel providers think about what they're going to do with their channel. I've always had the attitude that I will put up material that I would want to watch myself, whereas YouTube's kind of guidance is that you look at your analytics and see which type of videos are getting the most views and so on, and then provide more of that. But of course, the reason they do that is the more views, the more people see the adverts, and the more revenue you make and they make. So you're being led by a kind of consumer, driven kind of economy, rather than putting out material that you would yourself think is appropriate for your channel. And unfortunately, with my channel, as I said earlier in this very long video that I'm now producing for you, my channel isn't a wargaming channel. If you read the description of what it's about my interests, which are principally in the past, in things that took place in the past. So I'm interested in history and archaeology. Even my videos on Dartmoor are to do with the past, because Dartmoor is just full of archaeological remains, dating right back to the Bronze Age, right through to industrial archaeology and so on, and even the natural rock formations and so on. The geology is, to do with the past. So I consider my Dartmoor videos to fit in with that. But if I were to follow YouTube's kind of, advice, I would look at my analytics and see that my wargaming content, is far and away the most popular kind of content on my channel, and produce more wargaming channel. And so it would alter, the presentation of my channel, which I don't want it to do. I want to produce material that I want people to see, rather than produce material that people want to see, if that makes sense. That you can get a fine balance, and if people don't want to see that material, then they don't have to watch it. So I think that's a perfectly valid way of going about it. So just recently, there was a kind of controversy in the wargaming community about a particular channel had put up a video with a very kind of provocative statement about how if you wargamed German World War II forces, then it immediately meant that you sympathised with the Nazi kind of party and so on. It was clearly designed to kind of provoke and agitate wargamers, and it certainly did that. But what most people didn't seem to appreciate, and if they did, then their responses were very cynically designed to provoke viewers for their own channel and hence increase revenue, was that the whole thing was meant to stir up a reaction and get people to like or dislike and watch and so on. And when you look at the thousands of views that some of the responses got, let alone the the initial video, you can see exactly what was going on. People were kind of too kind of introspective, too involved in the tiny little worlds that they were watching through these smartphones, didn't really have a view of the bigger picture. And that is because smartphone technology and modern technology is definitely polarizing people, but it's also narrowing their outlook on the world. I mean the reason I took my comments off was a reaction over the kind of the deliberate understatement of conversations on the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and yet those same channels that made a deliberate policy about not talking about the Ukraine invasion, but also politics. I can understand the politics, but not so much the Ukraine thing. But they were kind of the channels that seemed to be the most outspoken about responding to this rather stupid remark about Nazism. And it just made me get a sense of perspective. Think about the real world and not your tiny little narrowly focused world, and just don't don't respond to things like that, unless your real aim is to get viewers for your channel, to get views for your content. Then don't bother. Just let it go. James at channel at JVC Paints described it very well. He described it as feeding the monkey, and that's exactly what they were doing. But anyway, to get back to my channel update, recently, as I just said earlier, I acquired a drone, and I've started putting up footage I've taken using my drone on my channel, and it's getting hardly any notice, and that is precisely because it's really kind of not of interest to the bulk of my viewers, because the bulk of my viewers are wargamers, and they're not necessarily going to be interested in footage, from my drone. But also the theme of my channel is the past and so on. So anyone else who has subscribed to my channel who isn't interested in wargaming is hardly likely to be interested in aerial footage of, no matter how good it is. So I was thinking maybe of starting a new channel for my drone, and that would be the obvious solution. But of course, now YouTube can monetize that content, because and I couldn't, because I would have to start right from 0 subscribers and work my way up to 1,000 before I could monetize it myself. And so I am going to continue to upload drone footage to my YouTube channel. So that is going to be the main change that you will notice on my channel, that I'm going to try and kind of expand my audience. So, most people are happy to watch, the Wargaming channel when it comes along, I would imagine, and to ignore the rest of my content, which is which is perfectly fine by me. The unfortunate thing is that my wargaming views, views of other channels, is going down for 2 reasons. One, because I don't really want to watch adverts in the middle of the content. I'm happy with skippable ads at the beginning and the end, but I just don't want to see adverts in the middle. But B, a lot of the channels that I've watched over the years have just ceased to upload. Part of that might be due to unfortunate circumstances like illness or even mortality, but other people, especially since lockdown ended, just seem to have given up on their channels, and might produce one video a year, if that. So I'm certainly not going to drop down to that level of frequency, but you will as going forward, notice far more non-wargaming related material on my channel, but the wargaming related stuff is still going to be there, so I hope you continue to watch that. But on the comments, my original intention was to only put comments back on my channel once the whole nasty business in the Ukraine was over, and that obviously is going to drag on for a considerable amount of time. So rather than kind of cut myself off entirely from the people that I have made friends with and so on, even if I've never met them in the flesh, and I have met quite a lot of you at war game shows and so on, just to maintain some kind of contact with you, that I know a few of you have made efforts to get in touch with me outside of the channel or through your own content. To make it a little bit easier for those people, I'm going to resume comments on my drone content and not on anything else, so you will be able to still make remarks there, and I'll see how that goes. If I start getting trolled on that, or even start getting very sort of bland remarks that I just feel I can't be bothered to make the effort of replying to, then I might start either deleting the comments from that, or stopping comments entirely, disabling the comments on that, and we'll see how that goes. But I really think I'll put a link, one of those suggested things at the end of this video, which I apologise for now, has gone on for ages. But I really do think that the last bit of drone footage I put up, which the title of it was Another Flight Over Mount Edgecombe, I think that was some of the best material I've put up on my channel in all the years I've been doing my channel. So I would, really like people to watch it, even if you just watch that and never watch another bit of my drone footage. Just take a look at it and tell me what you think of it. And I think, I was going to say the top 10 most viewed videos on my channel, 6 of them are wargaming related, mainly battle reports. In fact, I think that if I'm right, I think they're all battle reports. So there were 6 battle reports that have done very well. 3 videos of ships. So the kind of naval interest, is quite considerable on my channel as well. But particularly with those videos, I'm pretty sure they are watched by a completely different audience profile. I doubt very much that there are many wargamers, who watch those, but nevertheless, 3 of my videos are of particular vessels going through Plymouth Sound, and 1 video in my top 10 is a retro game which I uploaded and has caught on with the retro gaming community. So that would probably overlap more with the wargaming community, but that has proved very popular as well. So I doubt very much that my drone footage will ever get up to those sort of giddy heights. But for me personally, for what I want to do, for what I want to present to the YouTube community, the drone footage is very important to me. So that is the way I'm going to go forward, rather than pursuing hits and pursuing views and advertising revenue. So that's just to let you know what's going on. And that, again, apologies for the length of this video. Thank you very much for watching, everybody, and see you on the next video. Bye for now.